The maid cleaning the suite fell asleep, and the Mafia boss claims her. Now, trapped in his world, can she escape his dark obsession, or will she be his forever? The soft leather couch beckoned to Lila like a siren's call. Her muscles ached from hours of scrubbing bathrooms and changing sheets, and the weight of exhaustion pressed down on her shoulders. The penthouse suite stretched out before her, a testament to wealth and power with its marble floors and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the glittering city below. Just 5 minutes, she told herself. 5 minutes to rest her eyes. The couch embraced her as she sank down, the leather cool against her skin. The distant hum of traffic 40 floors below mingled with the quiet whir of the air conditioning. Her eyelids grew heavy, and despite her best efforts to stay alert, sleep pulled her under like a gentle tide. The click of the door opening yanked her from her light doze. Before she could fully wake, a presence filled the room, something dark and dangerous that made the air feel thick with tension. "What do we have here?" The voice was deep, accent tinged with Russian ice. Lila's eyes flew open to meet a piercing gray stare that pinned her in place. The man towering over her was dressed in an impeccable black suit that did nothing to hide the lethal grace of his body. His jaw was sharp enough to cut glass, and his dark hair was swept back from a face that belonged in a Renaissance painting of fallen angels. Viktor Vasiliev, the Wolf, the owner of not just this suite, but the entire hotel. Lila's heart slammed against her ribs as she scrambled to sit up. "I'm so sorry, sir. You were just sleeping on my property without permission." His words were soft but carried the weight of steel. He moved closer, each step measured and predatory. "Tell me, little maid, do you make a habit of napping in guests' rooms?" "No, sir. Never." She tried to stand, but his hand shot out, gripping her shoulder, with enough pressure to keep her seated. His touch sent sparks of electricity through her body, equal parts fear and something else she didn't want to name. "Stay." It wasn't a request. His eyes raked over her, taking in every detail from her simple uniform to her trembling hands. "What's your name?" "Lila," she whispered, hating how small her voice sounded. A dark smile curved his lips. "Lila," he repeated, testing the word like a fine wine. "You've made quite a mistake tonight, Lila. The question is, what am I going to do about it?" Victor moved silently across the plush carpet, his dark figure casting a long shadow over Lila's sleeping form. For a moment he studied her. The gentle rise and fall of her chest, the way her work uniform had twisted slightly around her small frame. His jaw tightened. "Wake up!" His voice cut through the silence like a blade. Lila's eyes flew open. The moment she registered, the tall, imposing figure looming over her, panic seized her chest. She scrambled upright, nearly falling off the couch in her haste. I'm so sorry," she stammered, her heart hammering against her ribs. "I didn't mean to." "No one sleeps on my property without permission." Victor's voice was ice cold, each word precisely measured. His steel-gray eyes pinned her in place, taking in every detail of her disheveled appearance. "What's your name?" "Lila," she whispered, fighting the urge to run. But something told her running would be a terrible mistake. "Well, Lila," he said, taking a step closer. The expensive fabric of his suit caught the dim light as he moved. "Since you're here, you might as well finish what you started. The bathroom still needs cleaning." She swallowed hard. "It's late, I should." That wasn't a suggestion. His tone left no room for argument. "Get to work." Lila's hands trembled as she stood, careful to keep distance between them. She could feel his eyes following her every movement as she gathered her cleaning supplies. The air felt thick with tension, making it hard to breathe. As she moved toward the bathroom, Victor settled into an armchair, loosening his tie but never taking his gaze off her. He pulled out his phone, but Lila knew he was watching. She could feel it, the weight of his attention like a physical touch across her skin. This wasn't just about cleaning anymore. Something had shifted in her world, something dangerous and impossible to take back. And deep down, Lila knew her life would never be the same after tonight. Lila's hands trembled as she wiped down the marble counter, painfully aware of Victor's presence behind her. His reflection in the polished surface watched her every move, those steel gray eyes never wavering. The silence in the room felt thick enough to choke on. She grabbed the cleaning spray, forcing herself to breathe normally. "I'm almost finished, sir. Take your time." His voice was smooth, dangerous, like black ice on a winter road. Lila moved to the next surface, her skin prickling under his steady gaze. The man radiated power, filling the massive penthouse with his presence. Even the air felt heavier around him. She noticed a small smudge on the mirror and reached up to clean it. Her uniform stretched across her back, and she felt his eyes tracking the movement. Heat crept up her neck. "You're thorough," he said, the words coming out like a purr. "I appreciate attention to detail." Lila swallowed hard. "Thank you." Finally, after what felt like hours, she packed up her cleaning supplies. Freedom was just steps away. She turned toward the door, clutching her cart like a shield. "Stop!" The command froze her in place. Victor's footsteps echoed as he approached, each step measured and deliberate. "You'll return tomorrow. Same time." Her heart dropped. I'm not scheduled for this floor tomorrow." He moved closer, and she could feel the heat radiating off his body. "You are now." "Mr. Vasiliev, this isn't a request." His tone left no room for argument. "Tomorrow, Lila." The way he said her name sent shivers down her spine. She nodded once, unable to meet his eyes, and hurried out of the suite. In the elevator, she pressed her forehead against the cool metal wall and tried to slow her racing heart. She was trapped in the wolf's den, and somehow she knew this was only the beginning. Lila's hand trembled as she swiped her keycard at the penthouse entrance. The lock clicked, and her heart jumped with it. She'd spent the entire night tossing and turning, Victor's cold commands echoing in her head. The door swung open, and her breath caught. Victor stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, his dark suit perfectly tailored to his broad shoulders. He turned, and their eyes met in the reflection. "You're late." His voice carried across the room like ice. Lila clutched her cleaning cart tighter. "I'm right on schedule." "My schedule, not the hotel's." He turned, his steel gray eyes pinning her in place. "And my schedule says you should have been here 15 minutes ago." She bit back a sharp reply. This was exactly what she'd feared. His need to control everything, including her. Keeping her eyes down, she wheeled her cart toward the kitchen. "Look at me when I speak to you." The command was soft, but absolute. Lila's spine stiffened. She turned slowly, lifting her chin. "I need to start cleaning." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Defiant little thing, aren't you?" He crossed the room in long strides, each step screaming power and authority. Lila held her ground even as her pulse raced. He stopped inches from her, close enough that she could smell his expensive cologne. "Let me make something clear," he said, reaching out to tuck a loose strand of hair behind her ear. The gentle touch sent shivers down her spine. "You work for me now. Not the hotel. Me. I never agreed to that." Her voice came out stronger than she felt. "You didn't have to." Hours crawled by as Lila cleaned, hyper-aware of Victor's presence. He made calls, reviewed documents, but his attention never truly left her. She felt his eyes following her every move, studying her like a puzzle he intended to solve. As the sun began to set, Lila gathered her supplies. "I'm finished." "No." Victor's voice cut through the room. "You're not done yet." She turned to face him, frustration burning in her chest. "The suite is clean. I decide when you're done." He approached her again, this time stopping so close. She had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. "And I'm not finished with you yet." Lila's heart hammered against her ribs. She was trapped in his web, and they both knew it. But deep inside, past the fear and uncertainty, something else stirred. A dangerous spark that refused to be extinguished by his intimidation. "What more do you want from me?" she whispered. Victor's eyes darkened. "Everything." Victor watched Lila from across the room, his dark eyes tracking her every movement. She worked with quiet efficiency, but there was something in the way she carried herself, a wariness that spoke of past wounds, like a dancer who'd learned to move through shadows. The morning light filtered through the floor to ceiling windows of his penthouse, casting a golden glow across the marble floors. Yet even in this warmth, Lila kept her guard up, her shoulders tense beneath her uniform. "Tell me about yourself," he said, his voice cutting through the silence. Lila's hands stilled on the crystal vase she was cleaning. "There's nothing to tell. Everyone has a story." He moved closer, enjoying how she tried not to flinch. "And yours? Yours interests me. I clean rooms, Mr. Vasiliev. That's all." Victor's lips curved into a cold smile. No one dismissed him like that. No one dared. But instead of anger, he felt curiosity bloom in his chest. She was hiding something, and if there was one thing Victor couldn't resist, it was uncovering secrets. The door opened, and Dmitri, his right-hand man, entered, with urgent news about territory disputes. Victor moved to the far corner of the room, speaking in low, commanding tones about necessary solutions to their problems. Mid-conversation, he felt eyes on him. Turning, he caught Lila watching, her expression a mix of fear and fascination. Their gazes locked, and for a moment, the air grew thick with unspoken tension. She looked away first, but Victor saw what he needed to see. The flash of recognition in her eyes. She understood his world better than she let on, and that made her not just interesting, but dangerous. "We'll finish this later," he told Dmitri, his attention already shifting back to the mystery that was his reluctant maid. The game was just beginning, and Viktor Vasiliev always played to win. Victor paced the length of his penthouse suite, his footsteps silent on the plush carpet. The message from the Petrov family lay open on his desk. A clear threat written in elegant script. Behind him, his lieutenants waited, the tension thick in the air. Lila worked quietly in the corner, her hands steady as she arranged fresh flowers in a crystal vase. Victor barely spared her a glance. She was background noise, unimportant compared to the storm brewing. "They're testing us." Anton, his second in command, said quietly. "First the shipment interference, now this." Victor's jaw tightened. "They think we've grown weak." His voice was cold enough to freeze the air. "That ends tonight." The quiet sound of Lila dropping something made them all turn. She quickly picked up the fallen duster, her cheeks flushing. Victor watched her for a moment, noting how she tried to make herself invisible. Smart girl. The tension snapped like a rubber band when the first gunshot rang out. Victor moved with deadly precision, drawing his weapon as his men scattered for defensive positions. The suite erupted in chaos. Glass shattering, furniture splintering under bullets. Then he saw it. One of Petrov's men advancing on. Mikhail, his youngest lieutenant who'd been caught in the open. Before Victor could move, Lila was there. She swung the heavy crystal vase, catching the attacker in the head. The man crumpled, his gun clattering to the floor. Time seemed to freeze as Victor stared at her. Lila stood there, chest heaving, pieces of crystal and water at her feet. Her eyes were wide but steady, showing none of the fear he expected. "Behind you!" she shouted. Victor spun, taking down another attacker with 2 precise shots. When the dust settled, 3 of Petrov's men lay dead or unconscious on his floor. He turned back to Lila, really seeing her for the first time. She wasn't cowering or crying. Instead, she met his gaze with a quiet strength that made something shift in his chest. "You're full of surprises, little bird," he said softly, dangerously. "I don't like surprises." Lila swallowed hard but didn't look away. "I don't like watching people die," she answered simply. Victor moved closer, towering over her. The scent of gunpowder mixed with her subtle perfume. "Yet you just saved one of my men." His eyes narrowed. "Why?" She lifted her chin. "Because it was the right thing to do." A laugh, sharp and humorless, escaped him. In his world, there was no right or wrong, only survival and power. But looking at her now, covered in water and standing among broken crystal, Victor realized she wasn't just a maid who'd fallen asleep on his couch. She was something far more dangerous. The scent of gunpowder still hung in the air. Lila's hands trembled as she stood in Victor's penthouse suite, her mind replaying the violent scene from moments ago. The way she'd acted on instinct, shoving Victor's man out of harm's way, still felt surreal. Victor approached her, his footsteps echoing against the marble floor. "Your quick thinking saved Dimitri's life." His voice was flat, mechanical, like he was discussing the weather. "You'll be compensated accordingly." Something inside, Lila snapped. Maybe it was the adrenaline still coursing through her veins, or maybe she'd finally reached her breaking point. Compensated? She spun to face him, her eyes blazing. "I just saved someone's life, and you're treating it like a business transaction?" Victor's expression hardened, his jaw tightening. "Everything is business." "No," Lila shot back, her voice stronger than she felt. "Not everything. I'm not just another asset in your empire, Victor. I'm a person." He moved closer, towering over her. The dangerous glint in his eyes should have frightened her, but she stood her ground. "A person who's now deeply involved in my world," he said, his voice low and threatening. "You're staying here tonight." "What? No, I can't." "It wasn't a request." Victor cut her off. "After what happened, you're a target. You'll be safer here." Lila wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly feeling the weight of her new reality crushing down on her. There was no going back to her normal life now. She was caught in Victor's web, and part of her wondered if she'd ever truly wanted to escape it. "Fine," she whispered, avoiding his intense gaze. "But this doesn't mean I belong to you." Victor's lips curved into a cold smile. "We'll see about that." As he walked away, leaving her alone in the vast penthouse, Lila felt the invisible chains of his world tightening around her. She'd crossed a line today, and there was no going back. The scariest part? She wasn't sure she wanted to. The dim lights of the penthouse cast long shadows across Victor's face as he paced before the floor-to-ceiling windows. Outside, the city twinkled like scattered diamonds, but inside, the atmosphere was heavy with unspoken tension. "Sit," Victor commanded, gesturing to the leather armchair across from him. His voice held no room for argument. Lila perched on the edge of the seat, her exhaustion forgotten in the face of his intensity. She watched as he poured himself a glass of amber liquid, the crystal decanter catching the light. "My father was killed when I was 12. He began without preamble, his accent thicker than usual, shot in the back by his own brother. He took a long drink, his knuckles white against the glass. That was my first lesson in trust. Lila's breath caught in her throat. She could see the young boy in him then, beneath the hardened exterior of the man. The rest. His laugh was bitter, hollow. The rest was survival. Every death, every betrayal, every drop of blood I spilled. It was all necessary. Hours passed. As Victor unveiled his past, like peeling back layers of old wounds. He spoke of power gained through violence, of loyalty bought with fear, of a life where weakness meant death. Lila listened, her heart racing at each brutal detail. Yet she couldn't look away from the raw pain that occasionally flickered across his face. When the sky began to lighten outside, Lila finally found her voice. "Is there anything human left inside you?" Victor stilled, his broad shoulders tensing. The silence stretched between them like a living thing. Without turning to face her, he moved toward the door. "Get some rest," he said flatly. But his hand lingered on the door frame. "You'll need it." The door clicked shut behind him, leaving Lila alone with the weight of everything he'd revealed and everything he hadn't. She stared at the spot where he'd stood, remembering the flashes of vulnerability in his eyes. Despite his dismissal, she had her answer. There was something human left in Viktor Vasiliev, something that perhaps only she could see. Lila's hands trembled as she folded the silk sheets on Victor's massive bed. 3 days had passed since that night he'd shared his past with her, and each moment in his presence felt like walking through a minefield of suppressed desire. She sensed him before she heard him. The air shifted, growing heavier with his presence as he entered the bedroom. Her spine stiffened, but she didn't turn around. "Still, pretending I don't affect you?" His voice was low, dangerous. "I'm working," she said, but the words came out breathier than she'd intended. Victor moved closer. The heat of his body reached her even though he didn't touch her. "Your pulse says otherwise." He leaned in, his breath warm against her neck. "It's racing right now." Lila gripped the sheet tighter, her knuckles turning white. "Don't. Don't what?" He circled her slowly, like a predator cornering its prey. "Don't notice how your breath catches when I'm near? Don't see how your body responds to mine?" She finally looked up at him, fighting the pull of those steel-gray eyes. "This isn't a game." "No," he agreed, reaching out to brush a strand of hair from her face. "This is inevitable." Lila jerked away, but her back hit the bedpost. Victor placed his hands on either side of her, caging her in. "You don't have to resist me, Lila." His voice dropped to a whisper that sent shivers down her spine. "I've already claimed you." Her heart thundered in her chest, betraying every word of denial she might have spoken. Because deep down, she knew he was right. She'd been his since that first night, whether she wanted to admit it or not. The meeting room reeked of expensive cologne and barely contained violence. Lila stood in the corner, pretending to dust the already pristine surfaces while watching Victor work. He sat at the head of the long mahogany table, his presence commanding every inch of the space. The man across from him, sweating through his designer suit, stammered excuses about missed payments. Victor's face remained as still as marble. "You had 3 chances." Victor's voice was soft, almost gentle. That's when Lila knew something terrible was about to happen. "I don't give fourth ones." It happened so fast. One moment, the man was pleading. The next, Victor's enforcer had him pressed face, down on the table, arm twisted behind his back. Lila's hand froze mid-motion, the cleaning cloth trembling in her grip. She'd seen Victor's power before, but never this close, never this raw. When it was over, and the man had been dragged away, Victor turned to her. His ice-blue eyes found hers across the room, and she knew he'd been aware of her presence the entire time. "Come here," he ordered. Her feet moved before her brain could protest. Victor waited until she was close enough to touch, then gripped her chin between his thumb and forefinger. "You look disturbed," he said, his touch surprisingly gentle. "Does it frighten you, seeing what I really am?" "I already knew what you were," Lila whispered, fighting to keep her voice steady. His lips curved into a cold smile. "No. You've seen glimpses. But this is my world, Lila. Violence, power, control. I won't apologize for it. I didn't ask you to." "Good." His thumb traced her bottom lip. "Because I need you to understand something. Everything I do, every threat, every act of violence, it's necessary. It keeps my empire strong. It keeps people like you safe." "People like me?" She couldn't help the defiance in her tone. "Yes." His grip tightened slightly. "People I've claimed as mine." Lila jerked away from his touch. But her heart hammered traitorously in her chest. She hated how his words affected her, how the danger surrounding him pulled at something dark inside her. "I don't belong to anyone," she said, but the words felt hollow, even to her own ears. Victor's laugh was low and without humor. "Keep telling yourself that, Malishka, but we both know you're already in too deep." He was right, and that terrified her more than any violence she'd witnessed. She was falling into his world, piece by piece, and the scariest part was that she wasn't sure she wanted to stop. The dress Victor had chosen for her felt like a collar. Black silk hugged Lila's curves, the fabric worth more than she made in months. She stood beside him at the high-end restaurant, feeling the weight of his hand on her lower back. His touch burned through the thin material. "Smile," he whispered, his breath hot against her ear. "You're mine now. Act like it." Lila's heart hammered against her ribs. She watched as Victor commanded the room, making deals over expensive whiskey and subtle threats. His power was terrifying, yet she couldn't look away. Every time she shifted, his grip tightened, keeping her close. "Stop fidgeting," he ordered, his voice low enough for only her to hear. "I'm not your puppet," she whispered back, though her body betrayed her by leaning into his touch. Victor's lips curved into a dangerous smile. "No, you're much more valuable than that." The evening stretched on, a dance of power and possession. Victor introduced her as his, nothing more. Each time, Lila felt something inside her break and reform, shaped by his will. When the last guest left, Victor turned to her. His eyes were dark, hungry. Before she could step back, his hand cupped her face. The kiss, when it came, was devastating. Soft yet demanding, gentle yet possessive, Lila's world tilted on its axis. She pulled away, breathing hard. "What are you doing?" Victor's thumb traced her bottom lip, his smirk knowing. "Claiming what's already mine." Lila touched her tingling lips, fear and desire warring in her chest. She wasn't ready for this, for him. But somehow, she knew it was already too late. "You can't own me," she whispered, but the words sounded hollow even to her ears. "I already do." His voice was silk over steel. "You just haven't accepted it yet." Lila's heart hammered against her ribs as she backed away from Victor's men. They had cornered her in the hotel's service corridor, their broad shoulders blocking both exits. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across their faces, making them look even more menacing. Mr. Vasiliev was clear. One of them growled, "You don't leave without permission. I'm not his property." Lila shot back, though her voice trembled. She glanced between them, looking for any gap she could slip through. There wasn't one. The bigger man stepped forward, reaching for her arm. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Just as his fingers brushed her sleeve, a voice cut through the air like a blade. What the fuck is happening here? The temperature in the corridor seemed to drop 10 degrees. Victor stood at the end of the hallway, his presence filling the narrow space. His face was calm, but his eyes burned with barely contained rage. The men stepped back immediately. "Sir, we were just what?" Victor's voice was soft, dangerous. "Just manhandling what's mine?" He crossed the distance in long strides, and Lila watched as both men seemed to shrink under his gaze. Victor's hand shot out, grabbing the bigger man by the throat and slamming him against the wall. "If you ever touch her again," Victor snarled, "I'll cut off your hands myself." The man's face turned red as he struggled to breathe. "Sorry, boss." Victor released him with disgust, then turned to Lila. His eyes softened just slightly when they met hers, but the anger still radiated from him in waves. "Both of you, out," he ordered without looking at his men. They scrambled away, leaving Lila alone with Victor in the corridor. She pressed herself against the wall, her chest rising and falling rapidly. "I just wanted to go home." "Home?" Victor stepped closer, placing one hand on the wall beside her head. "This is your home now, Lila. The sooner you accept that, the easier this will be." Lila closed her eyes, feeling the weight of his words settle over her like a heavy blanket. When she opened them again, Victor was watching her with that intense gaze that seemed to see right through her. "You can't keep me here forever," she whispered, but the words sounded hollow even to her own ears. Victor's lips curved into a small, knowing smile. "Watch me." In that moment, Lila knew with crushing certainty that she was trapped, not just by Victor's men or his power, but by the way her body responded to his presence, by the dangerous attraction that pulled her toward him even as her mind screamed to run. She was caught in Victor's web, and deep down, she wasn't sure if she wanted to escape anymore. Lila paced the length of Victor's penthouse suite, her fingers twisting together as she tried to sort through the chaos in her mind. The marble floors felt cold beneath her feet, a stark reminder of how far she'd strayed from her simple life as a maid. Now she was here, trapped in this gilded cage with a man who both terrified and captivated her. Victor watched her from his position by the window, his dark eyes tracking her every movement. He seemed amused by her restlessness, like a predator enjoying the sight of trapped prey. "Something troubling you?" His voice was smooth as silk, but there was steel underneath. Lila stopped pacing and turned to face him. "You know exactly what's troubling me. Your men tried to force me to stay yesterday. They were following orders." Victor stepped closer, his presence filling the space between them. "My orders. That's the problem." Lila backed away, bumping into the leather sofa. "You think you can control everything, everyone?" A small smile played at the corners of his mouth. "Can't I?" He reached out, his fingers brushing against her arm. The touch was light, barely there, but it sent electricity racing through her body. Lila jerked away, hating how her body responded to him. "Stop it!" she snapped. "Stop playing these games." Victor's eyes darkened. "This isn't a game, Lila." He moved closer, backing her against the wall. "You've been in my world long enough to know that." His cologne wrapped around her, masculine and expensive. Lila's heart hammered in her chest as he leaned in, his breath warm against her ear. "I need to leave," she whispered, her voice shaking. "Let me go." Instead of answering, Victor's hand came up to cup her face. His touch was surprisingly gentle, but his grip was firm. "You don't really want to leave. You don't know what I want. I know exactly what you want." His thumb traced her bottom lip. "You want the same thing I do." Lila pushed against his chest, desperate to put space between them. She strode toward the door, her hand reaching for the handle. I'm leaving. The sound of the lock clicking into place froze her in place. Victor's voice came from behind her, low and final. You belong here now, whether you want to or not. Lila's fingers trembled against the door handle. She knew he was right. She'd crossed a line she couldn't uncross. His world had become hers, and the scariest part wasn't that she was trapped. It was that a part of her didn't want to leave. Victor paced his penthouse suite like a caged animal, his footsteps echoing against the marble floors. Every few seconds, his eyes darted to Lila as she organized his desk, her movements precise and controlled. She'd been here for hours, and his patience was wearing dangerously thin. "Stop what you're doing," he ordered, his voice cutting through the silence. Lila's hands stilled, but she didn't turn around. "I'm working." Not anymore. He moved closer, close enough to catch the slight tremor in her shoulders. "Look at me when I speak to you." She turned, lifting her chin in that defiant way that made him want to break her and protect her all at once. "What do you want, Victor?" "I want you to understand something." He trapped her between his body and the desk, placing his hands on either side of her. "I don't like surprises. I don't like not knowing where you are, what you're doing." His voice dropped lower. "Who you're with. I'm not your possession." Lila shot back, but her breath hitched when he leaned closer. "Aren't you?" His lips curved into a cold smile. "Everything in this building belongs to me, including you." Lila's eyes flashed with anger. "I'm a person, not a piece of furniture you can own." Victor reached out, trailing one finger down her jaw. He felt her shiver, saw the way her pupils dilated despite her protests. "Your mouth says no, but your body." He pressed closer, satisfaction coursing through him when she gasped. "Your body knows the truth." "Stop it," she whispered. But her hands gripped the edge of the desk instead of pushing him away. "Make me." He backed her further into the corner, his body caging her in. His lips hovered just inches from hers, close enough to feel her rapid breaths against his skin. "You can fight it all you want, Lila, but you're mine." His voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "And I always get what I want." The tension crackled between them, electric and volatile. For a moment, neither moved, caught in a dangerous dance of resistance and desire. Then Victor pulled back, leaving Lila breathless and trembling against his desk. He'd wait. For now. After all, the best victories were the ones where his prey came to him willingly. The meeting had left its mark on Victor. Blood stained his white shirt cuff. Not his own, but a reminder of what he'd done. Lila watched from across the penthouse suite as he slumped into his leather chair, the setting sun casting long shadows across his face. For once, his cold mask slipped. He pressed his fingers against his temples, eyes closed. The gesture was so human, so unlike the monster she'd come to know, that Lila found herself moving toward him before she could stop herself. "Don't," Victor warned, without opening his eyes, but his voice lacked its usual bite. Lila hesitated, then continued forward. Her heart hammered against her ribs with each step. "You're in pain." "Pain is weakness." He dropped his hands, fixing her with those dark eyes that had haunted her dreams. "And I'm not weak." But Lila saw past the hardness in his gaze. She recognized something there. A familiar brokenness she'd seen in her own mirror too many times. Without thinking, she reached out, her fingers ghosting over his temple. Victor caught her wrist in a grip that should have frightened her. But instead of pushing her away, he held her there, his thumb pressing against her pulse point. The touch sent electricity through her veins. "What do you think you're doing?" His voice was dangerously soft. "I don't know," Lila whispered honestly. She didn't know why she cared, why her heart ached for this dangerous man who'd trapped her in his world. Victor's eyes darkened, as he pulled her closer, until she could feel his breath on her skin. Don't think for 1 second that this changes anything. His words were harsh, but his grip gentled. You don't know what it's like to be me. Then show me, Lila challenged, surprising herself with her boldness. His jaw clenched. For a moment she thought he might push her away. Instead, his fingers tightened around her wrist, keeping her close, trapped in this dangerous dance between them. Victor's mask of ice had returned by morning, harder and colder than before. He stood at the window of his penthouse suite, his broad shoulders rigid beneath his tailored suit as he stared out at the city below. The brief moment of vulnerability from yesterday was gone, replaced by something darker, more demanding. Lila felt it the moment she entered the room. The air seemed to crackle with tension. "You're late," he said, without turning around, his voice sharp enough to cut glass. "I'm exactly on time." Lila kept her voice steady, though her heart hammered against her ribs. She wouldn't let him see how much he affected her. Victor turned slowly, his dark eyes finding hers across the room. "When I say be here at 7, I expect you at 6:45. He crossed the space between them in 3 long strides. "You don't set the rules here, Lila. I do." She lifted her chin, refusing to back down even as he towered over her. "I'm not one of your men, Victor. You don't own me." His laugh was cold and without humor. "Don't I?" His hand shot out, fingers wrapping around her wrist. Not enough to hurt, but enough to remind her of his strength. "Look around you, little maid. Everything in this building belongs to me, including you. I don't belong to anyone." Lila spat, trying to pull away. Victor's grip tightened. "That's where you're wrong." He pulled her closer, his breath hot against her ear. "You've been mine since the moment I found you sleeping on my couch. You just haven't accepted it yet." Lila's body betrayed her with a shiver. She hated how her pulse quickened at his proximity, how her skin burned where he touched her. "I won't be another possession for you to control," she whispered, her voice shakier than she'd like. Victor's free hand came up to grasp her chin, forcing her to meet his gaze. "You don't fight me and win, Lila." His thumb brushed across her bottom lip, the gentle touch at odds with his harsh words. "You'll never be free, not from me." The words hit her like a physical blow, stealing her breath. Because deep down, in a place she didn't want to acknowledge, she knew he was right. She was caught in his web, and every struggle only entangled her further. Victor released her suddenly, stepping back with a cold smile. "Now, get to work. And remember, tomorrow, 6:45. Lila stood frozen, her wrist still burning from his touch, watching as he walked away. She'd never felt so trapped or so alive. The crystal chandeliers cast golden light across the ballroom, illuminating the dangerous beauty of Victor's world. Lila stood at the edge of the crowd, her black dress a stark contrast to the opulent surroundings. She watched as Victor worked the room, his presence commanding attention with each calculated step. He moved like a predator among prey. Though these weren't innocent victims, they were all sharks in their own right. Crime bosses, corrupt officials, and their elegant wives mingled under the pretense of civility. Yet Lila saw the truth in their eyes, the barely concealed violence that seemed to simmer beneath every polite smile. "Drink?" Victor appeared beside her, offering a glass of champagne. His proximity sent a shiver down her spine. "I'm fine," she said, her voice clipped. Even in his perfectly tailored black suit, she could sense the lethal grace beneath the refinement. His lips curved into a cold smile. "Still fighting me, I see." "Always." But her defiance felt weaker tonight, worn down by weeks of this strange dance between them. Victor's hand found the small of her back, the touch both possessive and gentle. "Come with me," he ordered softly. He led her through glass doors onto a private balcony. The cool night air, a relief from the suffocating tension inside. The city sprawled before them, a sea of twinkling lights that seemed so far removed from the dangerous world she now inhabited. "Why did you bring me here tonight?" Lila asked, turning to face him. Victor stepped closer, his fingers grazing the back of her neck. The touch sent electricity through her body, making her breath catch. His eyes, usually so cold, held something different tonight, something that looked almost like vulnerability. "You're my weakness," he admitted, his voice low and rough. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Lila's heart thundered in her chest. She searched his face, trying to understand this man who dealt in death yet touched her with such care. "Is that why you keep me trapped here? Because I make you weak?" His grip tightened slightly. "No," he said. "I keep you here because you're the only thing that makes me feel human anymore." The confession stunned her into silence. For the first time, she saw past the monster to the broken man beneath, and it terrified her how much she wanted to heal him. Lila stood at the window of Victor's penthouse suite, watching the city lights flicker in the gathering dusk. Her reflection stared back at her, a ghost of the woman she used to be. 3 weeks had passed since she'd first fallen asleep on this couch, and now she barely recognized herself. The door clicked open. Victor's heavy footsteps echoed across the marble floor, and her body tensed instinctively. She didn't turn around. "You're thinking too hard," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "I can see it in your shoulders. I can't help it." Lila wrapped her arms around herself. "This isn't normal, Victor. None of this is normal." He moved behind her, his chest barely touching her back. His breath stirred her hair as he spoke. "Normal was never an option for you. Not after that first night. Because you decided that for me?" The words came out sharp, defensive. Victor's hand gripped her hip, spinning her to face him. His dark eyes burned into hers. "Because you're mine now. The sooner you accept that, the easier this will be." Lila tried to step back, but the window stopped her. "I'm not a possession." "No?" His thumb traced her bottom lip. "Then why do you tremble when I touch you? Why do you watch me when you think I'm not looking?" Before she could answer, the suite door burst open. One of Victor's men rushed in, face tight with urgency. "Boss," he said, "the Kazakov family, they're moving in on the docks." Victor's entire demeanor shifted. The tenderness in his touch vanished, replaced by cold fury. He stepped away from Lila, already reaching for his phone. "Get the cars ready," he ordered. "No one touches our territory." Lila's heart pounded as she watched him transform from the man who touched her so gently to the monster everyone feared. He paused at the door, turning back to her with eyes that promised violence. "Stay here," he commanded. "Don't leave this suite. I'll handle this." The door slammed behind him, leaving Lila alone with her racing thoughts and the knowledge that somewhere in the city, blood would be spilled tonight. She pressed her forehead against the cool glass of the window, watching Victor's black SUVs pull away from the hotel. She was trapped in his world now, caught between his tenderness and his brutality, and she wasn't sure which scared her more. The safe house was nothing like Victor's penthouse. No gleaming surfaces or opulent furniture, just stark functionality wrapped in reinforced walls. Lila stood at the window, watching shadows creep across the lawn as dusk settled in. Victor's presence filled the room behind her. She could feel him there, that familiar weight of his attention that made her skin prickle. "You don't have to hover," she said, not turning around. "I'm not going anywhere." His footsteps were silent on the hardwood floor, but suddenly he was right there, his chest nearly touching her back. "No," he agreed, his voice low and dangerous. "You're not. The heat from his body seeped through her thin sweater. Lila crossed her arms, trying to hold onto her anger, but it was getting harder each day, especially when he acted like this, protective, possessive, almost gentle in his own twisted way. "Why did you bring me here?" she whispered. Victor's hands came to rest on her shoulders, his touch surprisingly light. "Because they were getting too close." His fingers tightened slightly. "And I don't share what's mine." Lila's heart skipped. "I'm not yours." He chuckled, the sound dark and knowing. "Keep telling yourself that, Solnishko." She turned then, looking up at him. In the fading light, his face was all sharp angles and shadows, but his eyes, there was something different there, something that made her breath catch. "You're safer here," he said, one hand coming up to cup her face. His thumb traced her cheekbone, the gesture almost tender. "No one knows about this place. No one can touch you, except you," Lila whispered. Victor's eyes darkened. "Always me." He guided her to the window seat, settling behind her so she was cradled against his chest. Outside, stars were beginning to peek through the purple sky, his arms wrapped around her waist, protective and possessive all at once. "You're safe here, Lila," he murmured against her hair. "No one will hurt you." But there was steel beneath the softness of his words, a promise of violence for anyone who dared to try. Lila shivered, knowing that this moment of peace was built on a foundation of blood and brutality. Yet as Victor's warmth surrounded her, as his steady heartbeat echoed against her back, she couldn't help but lean into him. Maybe this was Stockholm Syndrome, or maybe she was just tired of fighting. Either way, in that moment, wrapped in the arms of a monster who would burn the world down to protect her, Lila felt safer than she ever had before, and that terrified her more than any threat ever could. The night exploded in gunfire and screams. Lila pressed herself against the wall of Victor's penthouse, her heart hammering against her ribs. The rival family had struck without warning, a brutal message written in bullets and blood. Through the reinforced windows, she watched as black SUVs surrounded the building. Victor's reaction was immediate and terrifying. His eyes turned to ice as he barked orders into his phone, his free hand reaching for Lila. "Stay close," he commanded, pulling her behind him as his security team flooded the suite. The next few hours passed in a blur of violence. Lila had seen Victor's darkness before, but never like this. He moved like a predator, each action calculated and lethal. When one of the rival family's men managed to get too close to Lila, Victor's response was swift and merciless. The sound of breaking bones made her flinch. "This is what happens," Victor snarled at the man writhing on the floor, "when you threaten what's mine." Lila should have been horrified. She should have run. Instead, she found herself mesmerized by the raw power radiating from him, the absolute control he commanded even in chaos. Hours later, Victor returned to the penthouse. Blood stained his expensive suit, and his knuckles were raw. But his eyes, when they found Lila, held something she'd never seen before, a mix of fury and desperate relief. He crossed the room in 3 long strides, his hands cupping her face. "They won't hurt you again," he said, his voice rough with promise. "I made sure of it." Lila knew she should be terrified of this man who dealt in death so easily. Instead, she found herself leaning into his touch, drawn to the dangerous safety he offered. In his world of shadows and violence, he was her darkest protection. "I know," she whispered, and felt the last of her resistance crumble as his bloody hands pulled her closer. The penthouse suite was eerily quiet after the violence. Blood still stained Victor's white shirt, a stark reminder of what he was capable of. Lila stood by the window, her arms wrapped around herself, trying to process everything she'd witnessed. Her heart raced as Victor's footsteps echoed behind her. She could feel him getting closer, his presence filling the room like a dark cloud. Every instinct told her to run, to put distance between herself and this dangerous man. "Don't." His voice was low, commanding. "Don't pull away from me." Lila turned, meeting his dark gaze. "How can I not? After what I just saw." Victor moved with lightning speed, his hands cupping her face. His touch was surprisingly gentle for someone who'd just shown such brutality. "Look at me," he demanded. She tried to turn away, but his grip tightened. His eyes burned into hers, filled with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Everything I did was to protect you," he said. "Everything I am. It's for you now." Before she could respond, his mouth crashed onto hers. The kiss was desperate, possessive, burning with everything he couldn't say. His hands tangled in her hair as he pulled her closer, claiming her with a passion that made her knees weak. Lila's mind screamed at her to resist, but her body betrayed her. She melted into him, tasting the danger on his lips, feeling the power in his touch. For a moment, she lost herself in the heat of his kiss. Then reality crashed back in. She pushed against his chest, breaking free. Her chest heaved as she stumbled backward, putting space between them. "You can't," she gasped. "You can't just own me, Victor." A cold smile curved his lips as he watched her, his eyes dark with possession. "I already do." His words sent a shiver down her spine. Because deep down, Lila knew he was right. The morning sun filtered through the penthouse windows, but it did nothing to warm the ice in Victor's eyes as he watched Lila pace the suite. She'd been at it for hours, her frustration building with each step. "You can't keep doing this," she finally snapped, turning to face him. "You can't just control everyone around you like they're chess pieces." Victor didn't move from his position behind his desk. His stillness was more threatening than any sudden movement could be. "I can. I do. And you know why?" His voice dropped lower. "Because that's how I keep everyone alive." "Is that what you tell yourself?" Lila's hands shook, but her voice remained steady. "That being a monster is the only way?" He stood then, his movement fluid and predatory. In 3 long strides he was in front of her, backing her against the wall. "A monster?" His laugh was cold. "Sweetheart, you haven't seen the monster yet." Lila lifted her chin, refusing to be intimidated despite her racing heart. "I've seen enough. The killing, the threats, the way I what?" His hand came up to trace her jaw, gentle but threatening. "The way I protect what's mine? The way I make sure you're safe? I never asked for your protection. You didn't have to." His thumb brushed her bottom lip, and she hated how her body responded to his touch. "The moment you fell asleep on my couch, you became mine to protect." Lila tried to push past him, but he caught her wrist, spinning her back against his chest. His breath was hot against her ear. "You want to leave? Fine." His words were silk over steel. "The door's right there. But understand something, Lila." He turned her to face him. "You can walk out that door, but only if you're ready to walk away from everything. From me." Her breath caught. The choice shouldn't have been difficult. Freedom from this dangerous world should have been everything she wanted. But as she stared into Victor's dark eyes, she saw the promise there, the possession, the protection, and something else. Something that made her wonder if the monster everyone feared might be capable of more than just destruction. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken words and dangerous possibilities. Victor's grip on her wrist loosened, but she didn't pull away. She couldn't. and they both knew it. The morning sun filtered through the penthouse windows, casting long shadows across the marble floors. Lila stood at the window, watching the city below. When she heard the elevator doors open, her heart skipped. She knew Victor's footsteps by now, the steady, confident stride that commanded attention. But these steps were different. It was Dimitri, Victor's most trusted lieutenant, the man who'd shown her small kindnesses over the past weeks, bringing her coffee when Victor kept her working late, offering gentle smiles when no one was looking. "Lila," he said softly, "we need to talk." She turned, noting the tension in his shoulders. "What's wrong?" "Victor." Dimitri's voice cracked. "He's not who you think he is. I've seen things, terrible things. And now he's planning something that will get us all killed." Lila's stomach clenched. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying we need to get out. Both of us." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I can help you escape tonight." The offer hung in the air like smoke. Lila's mind raced. Freedom, the thing she'd wanted since the moment Victor had claimed her. But something felt wrong. "Why now?" she asked, backing away slightly. The elevator dinged again. Victor appeared, his dark presence filling the room instantly. His eyes narrowed as they landed on Dimitri. "Well," Victor's voice was deadly quiet. "Isn't this interesting?" Dimitri spun around, his hand reaching for his weapon. But Victor was faster. In seconds, he had Dimitri pressed against the wall, arm twisted behind his back. "Did you really think I wouldn't know?" Victor snarled. "That my own man would betray me to the Italians?" Lila's blood ran cold. The Italians, Victor's biggest rivals. She'd heard enough to know what this meant. Victor's eyes found hers. "And you, Lila, where do you stand?" She felt the weight of the moment crushing her. Dimitri had been kind to her, but Victor was something else entirely. A monster maybe, but one who'd gotten under her skin. "I'm not with him," she said firmly, meeting Victor's gaze. A cruel smile curved Victor's lips. "Good girl." He turned back to Dimitri. "You should have known better than to try to take what's mine." "Victor," Dimitri started, but Victor's grip tightened. "Lila," Victor's voice was ice. "You're with me now. Completely. There's no middle ground anymore. Do you understand?" She nodded, her throat tight. "I understand." "Good." Victor's eyes never left her as he called for his men. "Because after tonight, there's no going back. You're either mine or you're nothing." Lila watched as they dragged Dimitri away, knowing she'd just sealed her fate. She'd chosen Victor, chosen the darkness, and somehow that terrified her less than the alternative. The city lights blurred outside the penthouse windows as Lila paced, her heart hammering against her ribs. Victor had stormed out hours ago, his eyes colder than she'd ever seen them. The betrayal had cut deep, not just for him, but for her too. She'd trusted Anton, thought he was different from the others in Victor's crew. She should have known better. Her phone buzzed. A text from Victor. "Stay inside. Lock the doors." The message sent chills down her spine. She knew what was happening out there. Victor was hunting, and he wouldn't stop until he'd destroyed everyone who'd crossed him. Hours passed like years. Every sound made her jump. Every shadow seemed to hide a threat. Finally, the elevator dinged. Lila's breath caught in her throat as Victor stepped out. Blood stained his white shirt. His knuckles were raw, and his eyes. God, his eyes were terrifying. But when they landed on her, something in them softened, just barely. "It's done," he said, his voice rough. Lila couldn't move. "Anton? He won't betray anyone ever again." Victor crossed the room in long strides, backing her against the wall. His hands came up to cage her in, and she could smell copper and gunpowder on him. "You understand now, don't you? What happens to people who cross me?" She swallowed hard. "Yes." "Good." His fingers traced her jaw, leaving invisible marks on her skin. "Because you're mine, Lila. Forever. There's no running from this. From me. The sooner you accept that, the better." His words should have terrified her. They should have made her want to run. Instead, they settled something deep inside her. Something that had been fighting this truth since the day she fell asleep on his couch. "I know," she whispered. And for the first time, she truly meant it. Victor's eyes darkened. He leaned in close, his lips brushing her ear. "Say it. I'm yours." His grip tightened, possessive and unyielding. "Forever," he demanded. Lila looked up at him, this dangerous, broken man who'd claimed her so completely. "Forever," she agreed, and sealed her fate with that single word. The penthouse felt different now, colder, more dangerous. Lila watched as Victor paced near the floor-to-ceiling windows. His dark suit a stark contrast against the city lights below. His jaw was set, muscles tense, and she could practically feel the rage rolling off him in waves. "They're getting bolder," he said, his accent thicker with anger. "Coming closer to what's mine." Lila's throat tightened at his words. She'd seen enough in the past weeks to know what happened to people who crossed Viktor Vasilyev. The blood, the violence, the way he could switch from calculated businessman to ruthless killer in seconds. "I'm not yours," she said. But the words lacked conviction. They both knew it was a lie. Victor turned, his dark eyes finding her in the dim light. He moved toward her with predatory grace, backing her against the wall. His hand came up to cup her face, thumb brushing her bottom lip. The touch was gentle, but his eyes were hard. "Everything in this room belongs to me," he said softly, "including you." Her heart hammered against her ribs. "You can't own people, Victor." "I can. I do." His other hand settled on her hip, grip firm. "And anyone who tries to take what's mine will learn that lesson in blood." Lila shivered, caught between fear and something else. Something that felt dangerously like desire. She'd seen his brutality, but she'd also seen his protection. The way he'd tear apart anyone who threatened those under his care. His phone buzzed, breaking the moment. Victor's expression darkened as he read the message. "Stay here," he ordered, already moving toward the door. "My men will guard the building. Don't leave the penthouse." "I'm not a prisoner," Lila protested. But Victor was already shaking his head. "No," he agreed. "You're something far more valuable." He paused at the door, his gaze heavy. "And that makes you more dangerous than any prisoner could ever be." The door closed behind him with a final click, leaving Lila alone with her thoughts and the growing realization that she was in too deep to ever truly escape. Lila stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse, watching smoke rise from the warehouse district. Her fingers pressed against the cool glass as sirens wailed in the distance. She knew what it meant. Victor's enemies had finally made their move. Her phone buzzed. Another message from Victor's lieutenant. "Stay inside. Don't open the door for anyone." The luxury penthouse felt more like a prison now. Designer, furniture, and expensive art couldn't mask the danger closing in. She paced across the marble floors, her heart racing with each new explosion that lit up the night sky. Hours passed like years. The sun had long since set when heavy footsteps echoed in the hallway outside. 3 sharp knocks made her jump. "Miss Lila?" A familiar voice. Dmitri, one of Victor's most trusted men. She opened the door carefully. Dimitri's face was hard, his eyes cold as he stepped inside with 2 other guards. "Boss wanted us to check on you." His tone was respectful but carried an edge of warning. "Make sure you understand the situation." "I understand perfectly well," Lila said, lifting her chin. "I'm trapped here until Victor decides otherwise." Dimitri's lips twitched. "You're protected here. There's a difference." He moved closer, towering over her. "But make no mistake, you belong to him now. That means following orders, staying put when he tells you to stay put." The threat in his words was clear. She might have Victor's love, but that didn't give her any real power here. She was still just a piece in his game. "Is he?" She swallowed hard. "Is Victor okay? Boss can handle himself." Dimitri's expression softened slightly. "Just do as you're told, and everything will be fine." They left her alone again, the heavy door clicking shut behind them. Lila wrapped her arms around herself, staring at her reflection in the darkened windows. She saw what they saw: a woman caught between worlds, wearing designer clothes that felt like chains, living in luxury that was really just another form of capture. She belonged to Victor now, body and soul. But as another explosion lit up the night sky, she wondered if belonging to him would get her killed. Victor burst through the penthouse doors, his jaw clenched and his eyes blazing with fury. Lila knew that something was terribly wrong. She stood frozen by the window, watching as he stalked across the room like a caged animal. "Anton!" He spat out the name like poison. It was Anton all along. Lila's heart dropped. Anton had been Victor's right-hand man, someone she'd seen him laugh with, plan with, trust with his life. "What do you mean?" Victor's laugh was hollow, dangerous. He's been feeding information to the Petrov family for months. Every attack, every threat, he orchestrated all of it. His fist slammed against the wall, making Lila jump. "I treated him like a brother." She approached him carefully, like you would a wounded predator. "Victor, don't!" His voice was ice. "I have to end this. Tonight." Fear gripped Lila's chest. She'd seen what happened to traitors in Victor's world. "You can't go alone. It's too dangerous." Victor turned to her, his expression softening for just a moment. He crossed the space between them in 2 long strides, his hands coming up to frame her face. "I won't let anyone threaten what's mine. Not even him." "Please," Lila whispered, gripping his wrists. "Stay. We can figure this out together." His thumb traced her bottom lip, but his eyes were already distant, cold. "I'll do whatever it takes to protect you, even if it means losing everything." Before she could argue, he pressed his lips to hers in a bruising kiss. It felt like goodbye, like a promise, like a threat all at once. Then he was gone, leaving Lila alone, with the weight of what was to come crushing her chest. The door clicked shut behind him with devastating finality. The heavy door clicked shut behind Victor, leaving Lila alone in the vast penthouse. Her fingers trembled as she wrapped her arms around herself, the silence pressing against her like a physical weight. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city lights sparkled, but they offered no comfort tonight. She paced the marble floors, her footsteps echoing in the emptiness. Every shadow made her jump, every distant sound had her heart racing. This wasn't just about Victor anymore. This was about survival. "What have I gotten myself into?" she whispered to herself, running her fingers through her tangled hair. The hours crawled by like years. Lila couldn't sit still, couldn't eat, couldn't even think straight. Her mind kept replaying Victor's last words. "I'll do whatever it takes to protect you, even if it means losing everything." The cold determination in his voice had scared her more than his anger ever had. When her phone finally rang at 3 a.m., she nearly dropped it in her rush to answer. "It's done." Victor's voice was low, rough. She could hear the darkness in it, the violence he'd just committed. The traitor won't be a problem anymore. Lila's throat tightened. Victor, don't. His tone softened slightly. You don't need to know the details. Just know that you're safe now. She sank onto the leather couch, her legs weak. You're different, she whispered. Ever since this started, I'm what I need to be. The edge in his voice was sharper now. This is who I am, Lila. This is what loving you has made me. The words hit her like a physical blow. Love. He'd never said it before. Not like this. And now it came wrapped in violence and darkness. Get some sleep, he ordered. I'll be back in the morning. The line went dead, leaving Lila alone with her thoughts again. She stared out at the city, at the world that seemed so normal beyond these walls. But she wasn't part of that world anymore. She belonged to Victor's world now, a world of shadows and violence, of passion and protection. She couldn't escape him. The realization should have terrified her, but instead it settled over her like a heavy blanket. What scared her more was that she wasn't sure she wanted to escape anymore. Whatever monster Victor was becoming, she was bound to him. By choice, or fate, or something darker still. As dawn began to break over the city, Lila finally closed her eyes, exhausted. She knew when Victor returned, he would be changed again, the darkness in him growing deeper. But she would be there, caught in his orbit, unable and unwilling to break free from the dangerous man who claimed to love her. Victor entered the penthouse, his presence filling the space with a dark energy that made Lila's skin prickle. Blood stained his white shirt cuffs, and his eyes held a coldness that spoke of the violence he'd just delivered. But when those eyes landed on her, something shifted in them, a flicker of warmth that scared her more than his anger ever could. It's done, he said simply, his voice rough from the night's events. Lila stood by the window, arms wrapped around herself. The city lights twinkled below, oblivious to the dangerous man who controlled so much of what happened in their shadows. She couldn't look at him directly, couldn't bear to see the mixture of tenderness and brutality that made her heart race. How many? She asked quietly. Does it matter? Victor moved closer, his footsteps silent on the plush carpet. They were a threat. Now they're not. The space between them crackled with tension. Lila could feel the heat of him behind her, even though he hadn't touched her. Her body betrayed her, leaning slightly backward, seeking his warmth, despite her mind's protests. Why do you stay? He asked suddenly, his voice softer than she'd ever heard it. You fight me at every turn, yet you're still here. Lila's breath caught in her throat. You know why? You've made it impossible for me to leave. Victor's hand came to rest on her shoulder, his touch surprisingly gentle. We both know that's not true anymore. You could run. I might even let you. She turned then, facing him fully. His face was hard as stone, but his eyes told a different story. He stopped, jaw clenching. I never thought I'd let anyone close enough to care, but you. His fingers traced her cheek, leaving fire in their wake. You've changed everything. Lila's heart thundered in her chest. This was the most dangerous version of Victor, not the brutal mafia boss, but the man who was capable of love. I'm in love with you, he admitted, the words falling between them like a death sentence. And that makes you the most dangerous person in my world. The confession hung in the air, heavy with promise and threat. Lila knew that loving Victor meant accepting all of him, the tenderness and the violence, the protection and the possession. It meant giving up the last shreds of her independence to a man who would burn the world down to keep her safe. And God help her, she was ready to let him. Victor's words hung in the air like smoke, thick and heavy. Lila stood by the penthouse window, her fingers tracing patterns on the cool glass as city lights twinkled below. Her heart wouldn't stop racing, hadn't stopped since his confession. "I never thought I'd let anyone close enough to care." The words played over and over in her mind. She'd seen him kill, seen him threaten, seen him destroy lives without blinking. But now, looking at his reflection in the window glass, she saw something different. The hard lines of his face seemed softer somehow, though no less dangerous. Victor moved behind her, his presence both threatening and comforting. His hand came to rest on her shoulder, and she felt the familiar flutter of fear mixed with something else. Something deeper, more primal. "What are you thinking?" His voice was low, gravelly. Lila turned to face him. "I'm thinking about how many people you've hurt." She paused, gathering her courage. "And how, despite everything, I understand why." His jaw tightened. Even now, he struggled with vulnerability, but his eyes, those cold, calculating eyes, held a warmth she'd never seen before. "The world I live in," he said slowly, "it breaks everyone eventually, but you." His hand cupped her face, thumb brushing her cheek. "You make me want to be more than just the monster they fear." Lila's breath caught in her throat. She should run. She should hate him. Instead, she found herself leaning into his touch. Victor pulled her closer, his arms wrapping around her like steel bands. But for the first time, his embrace felt less like a cage and more like shelter. His lips brushed her ear, sending shivers down her spine. "You're mine, Lila. I'll burn the world for you." She didn't pull away this time. Instead, she let herself melt against him, feeling the steady beat of his heart against her cheek. The wall she'd built between them, made of fear and resistance, began to crumble. In that moment, Lila realized she'd crossed a line she could never uncross. She was falling for the devil himself, and heaven help her, she didn't want to stop. The city lights flickered through the penthouse windows, casting shadows across Lila's face as she watched Victor prepare for war. Her heart ached with a mix of fear and something deeper, something she'd been fighting since the day she fell asleep on his couch. "You don't have to do this," she whispered, even though she knew it was pointless. Victor was already strapping his gun holster across his broad chest, his movements precise and deadly. He paused, those dark eyes finding hers in the dim light. "There's no choice anymore, Lila. They won't stop until one of us is dead." The weight of his words settled heavy in her stomach. This was her life now, loving a man who lived and breathed violence. She'd seen the tenderness in him, felt it in his touch, heard it in his rare moments of vulnerability. But she'd also witnessed the monster, the man who could order deaths without blinking. "And what happens to me if you don't come back?" Her voice cracked slightly. Victor crossed the room in 3 long strides, his hands cupping her face. His touch was gentle, but his grip was firm, possessive. Always possessive. "I'll always come back for you." His thumb traced her bottom lip. "You're mine, Lila. Death itself couldn't keep me from you." She tried to look away, but he wouldn't let her. "Will you still love me after all this is over? When the blood's dried and the bodies are buried?" Victor's jaw tightened. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken promises and dangerous truths. Instead of answering, he pulled her against him, his lips crashing down on hers. The kiss was brutal and tender all at once, everything that made Victor who he was. When he finally pulled back, his eyes were darker than she'd ever seen them. "Get some sleep. Lock the door. My men will be outside." Lila watched him walk away, her lips still burning from his kiss. She knew that tomorrow would bring either victory or destruction. There was no middle ground in Victor's world. And somehow, despite everything, she'd chosen to make it her world too. The city stretched out beneath the penthouse windows like a glittering minefield. Lila paced the luxurious space, her heart hammering against her ribs with every step. Somewhere out there, Victor was fighting a war she couldn't see but could feel in her bones. Hours crawled by like years. The sun set, casting long shadows across the marble floors, and still she waited. Her phone remained silent, though Victor's men checked in periodically, their faces grim and their words carefully chosen. When the door finally opened, Lila's breath caught in her throat. Victor stood there, his usually immaculate suit stained with blood. His face was a mask of exhaustion, but his eyes, those cold, piercing eyes, burned with an intensity that made her shiver. He'd won. She could see it in the set of his shoulders, in the deadly grace of his movements as he stepped inside. "It's done," he said, his voice rough like gravel. Lila took a hesitant step toward him. "Victor, don't." He held up a hand, keeping her at bay. "I need a moment." She watched as he crossed to the bar, pouring himself a drink with hands that trembled slightly. The crystal glass caught the light as he raised it to his lips, and Lila saw dried blood on his knuckles. "The rival family?" she asked softly. "They won't be a problem anymore." His words were cold, final. He turned to face her, and something in his expression made her heart ache. "It's over." But what?" Victor set down his glass with deliberate care. "It's not just the enemies I've been fighting. It's me." He looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time since she'd known him, she saw raw vulnerability in his eyes. "I'll never be the man I was before." Lila moved toward him slowly, like approaching a wounded wolf. "The man you were before." "What?" "Before you." His words hung in the air between them. "Before I had something. Someone worth protecting at any cost." She reached for him, and this time he didn't stop her. Her fingers found his jaw, feeling the tension there. "You're still you, Victor. That's all I've ever wanted." He caught her wrist in his hand, his grip firm but gentle. "The things I did today," he shook his head. "I crossed lines I can't uncross." "I know who you are," Lila whispered. "I've always known." Victor's other hand came up to cup her face, and she felt the roughness of his skin, the evidence of violence still fresh on his fingers. "And still you're here?" "I'm here," she confirmed, letting herself lean into his touch. "I'm yours." His eyes darkened at her words, and when he kissed her, it was with the desperate intensity of a man who'd faced death and emerged victorious. He tasted of blood and whiskey, and something uniquely him, and Lila surrendered to it completely. When they broke apart, Victor rested his forehead against hers. "Everything I've done, every life I've taken, it was all for this. For you, for us." In that moment, surrounded by the evidence of his violence, but held in the gentleness of his embrace, Lila understood the true cost of loving a man like Viktor Vasiliev, and she accepted it, darkness and all. The penthouse was quiet now, the chaos of Prayat, the past few days settling into an uneasy peace. Lila watched Victor as he stood by the window, his broad shoulders tense, his reflection dark against the city lights below. Blood still stained his white shirt, a reminder of what he'd done to keep them safe. "You're staring," he said without turning around. Lila's heart skipped. Even now, after everything, his voice sent shivers down her spine. "I'm trying to figure out who you really are." Victor turned then, his dark eyes finding hers. The coldness that had first terrified her was still there, but now she saw beyond it to the man who'd kill to protect what was his, who'd burn the world down just to keep her safe. "You know who I am." His voice was low, dangerous. "The question is, can you accept it?" Lila took a step forward, then another. The distance between them felt charged with electricity. "I've seen what you can do," she said. "The violence, the control, the power." She stopped just out of his reach. "But I've also seen how you look at me when you think I'm not watching." Victor's jaw tightened. He reached for her, his fingers grazing her cheek. The touch was gentle, at odds with the blood on his clothes. "Tell me what you want, Lila. I'm not afraid of you anymore." The words came out steady, sure. "But I need to know that this is real. That I'm not just another piece in your game." In one fluid motion, Victor pulled her against him. His hand tangled in her hair, tilting her face up to his. "You've never been a game." His eyes burned into hers. "You're the only thing that's real." When his lips met hers, it was softer than she expected from a man like him. But there was possession in that kiss, a promise of both protection and danger. He pulled back just enough to whisper against her lips, "I'll never let you go, Lila. You're mine, and I'm yours." Lila knew this. Was it? The point of no return. She could feel the weight of his world settling around her shoulders. But for the first time, it didn't feel like a cage. It felt like belonging. "I know," she whispered back, and felt his arms tighten around her. In this moment, in this dangerous, beautiful peace they'd found, she finally understood. Some loves were worth the darkness they brought with them. Blood stained Victor's white shirt as he stepped into the penthouse. The metallic scent of violence clung to him, a reminder of what he'd done to keep his empire and Lila safe. His eyes, usually sharp and calculating, were heavy with exhaustion, but the dangerous edge remained. Lila stood frozen by the window, her heart hammering against her ribs. The city lights behind her cast shadows across her face, hiding the relief that flooded through her at the sight of him alive. But the man before her wasn't quite the Victor she knew. There was something different in the way he carried himself, something darker. "It's done," he said, his voice rough from the night's events. He didn't move toward her, keeping his distance as if afraid his darkness might taint her. Lila took a hesitant step forward. "The rival family? They won't be a problem anymore." His words were cold, final. He flexed his bruised knuckles, and Lila couldn't help but notice the fresh cuts across his hands. The silence between them felt heavy, loaded with unspoken words. Lila watched as Victor walked to the bar and poured himself a drink, his movements slower than usual. When he winced slightly, she knew he was hiding other injuries. "You're hurt," she said softly. Victor's laugh was bitter. "This?" He gestured to his bloodied shirt. "This is nothing compared to what I've become." He downed the drink in one go, the crystal glass clinking against the marble counter as he set it down. "You should be afraid of me now, Lila, more than ever." But Lila wasn't afraid. Not anymore. She crossed the room to him, her steps sure despite the trembling in her chest. When she reached for him, Victor caught her wrist, his grip firm but not painful. "Don't," he warned, but his eyes told a different story. They begged her to stay, to understand, to accept the monster he'd become to keep her safe. "I'm not going anywhere," Lila whispered, her free hand reaching up to touch his face. Victor's eyes closed at her touch, a barely visible shudder running through him. "The things I did tonight," he started. "I know." And she did know. She'd always known what he was capable of, what his world demanded of him. Victor released her wrist, his hands moving to cup her face instead. "It's over now. The worst is behind us." His thumbs traced her cheekbones, leaving invisible marks of possession on her skin. But Lila saw the truth in his eyes. The battle might be over, but the war within him was far from finished. The darkness that had helped him survive tonight would never truly leave him. And as she stood there, caught in his embrace, she realized she had to decide if she could love both the man and the monster. Victor's forehead pressed against hers, his breath warm on her lips. "Stay with me," he whispered, and it sounded more like a prayer than a command. Lila closed her eyes, breathing in the scent of blood and expensive cologne that was uniquely him. She knew that staying meant accepting all of him, the protector and the killer, the lover and the beast. But as his arms tightened around her, she realized she'd made her choice long ago. The afternoon light filtered through the penthouse windows, casting long shadows across the marble floors. Lila watched Victor from across the room, noting how his shoulders tensed with each movement. The battle might have been won, but its cost was written in the new hardness of his jaw, the cold calculation in his eyes. He hadn't slept. Neither had she. Victor stood by the window, his phone pressed to his ear as he issued quiet commands to his men. Even his whispers carried weight, promising violence to anyone who dared cross him. When he caught her staring, his expression softened, for a fraction of a second before the mask slipped back into place. Lila's heart clenched. This was the dance they'd been doing since the beginning. One step forward, 2 steps back. Every time she thought she'd broken through his walls, they seemed to grow higher. "Come here," Victor commanded, ending his call. His voice was rough from exhaustion, but it still sent shivers down her spine. Lila approached slowly, each step measured. When she reached him, he grabbed her wrist, pulling her closer until she could feel the heat radiating from his body. "You're afraid," he stated. It wasn't a question. "Not of you," Lila lied. Victor's laugh was cold. "Don't lie to me, Lila. I can feel you trembling." She tried to pull away, but his grip tightened. Not enough to hurt he'd never hurt her, but enough to remind her that she was his. "I'm afraid of what you've become," she admitted finally. Something flickered in Victor's eyes. Pain, perhaps, or recognition. He released her wrist, but cupped her face instead. His touch surprisingly gentle for hands that had caused so much destruction. "I never knew how to love," he confessed, his voice barely above a whisper. "I only know how to take. But for you." He paused, his thumb tracing her bottom lip. "For you, I'd burn the world down." Lila's breath caught in her throat. This was Victor stripped bare. No masks, no walls, just raw truth. The revelation shook her to her core. This man, who commanded armies and destroyed enemies without mercy, was offering her the one thing he'd never given anyone else: his vulnerability. She stood frozen, caught between running and falling deeper into his darkness. But as she looked into his eyes, she saw something else. There too, a desperate need for understanding, for acceptance, for love. Lila stood at the floor to ceiling windows of Victor's penthouse, watching the city lights flicker below. Her reflection stared back at her, a ghost trapped in glass, and she couldn't help but wonder if that's what she'd become. A shadow of herself, caught in Victor's dark world. Behind her, Victor moved like a predator, his presence filling the room with dangerous energy. She could feel his eyes on her, watching, waiting. The silence between them was heavy with unspoken words. "You're afraid," he said finally, his voice low and controlled. It wasn't a question. Lila turned to face him, her heart pounding. "I'm afraid of what loving you means." Victor's jaw tightened. In 3 long strides, he crossed the room, stopping inches from her. His hand came up to cup her face, thumb brushing across her cheek with surprising gentleness. "Tell me what you're thinking," he demanded, though his tone was softer than usual. I see what you do, Lila whispered. The violence, the control. You destroy everything that threatens what's yours. She met his gaze. And I am yours, aren't I? Yes. The word came out like a growl. You've always been mine. Lila closed her eyes, fighting back tears. But what's left of me, Victor? How much of myself do I have to give up to be with you? His grip tightened slightly. You think I want to change you? Break you? He leaned closer, his breath warm against her ear. You're the only thing in this world that makes me feel human. That's what scares me, she admitted. The power you have over me. The way I can't imagine my life without you anymore. Victor pulled back, his dark eyes searching her face. Then don't. It's not that simple. It is. His voice was firm, brooking no argument. You can walk away, Lila, but know this. No one will ever love you like I do. No one will ever protect you the way I will. The truth of his words hit her like a physical blow. This was Victor, the man who'd killed for her, who'd torn apart anyone who'd tried to harm her, the man who could be so gentle with her, even while his hands were still stained with blood. Lila reached up, touching his face. His stubble was rough against her palm. I don't want to walk away. Then don't fight this anymore. His words were both a command and a plea. Be mine, completely. She knew what he was asking, to accept all of him, the darkness, the violence, the possessive love that threatened to consume them both, to stop trying to separate the man she loved from the monster everyone else saw. I'm yours, she whispered, and felt something inside her shift and settle. God help me, Victor, but I'm yours. His kiss was brutal and tender all at once, claiming her in a way that left no doubt about who she belonged to. When he finally pulled away, his eyes were dark with possession. Everything I am, he said roughly. Everything I have. It's yours too. Never forget that. Lila nodded, knowing she'd made her choice. She would love this dangerous man, this beautiful monster, and pray that his darkness didn't swallow her whole. But as Victor pulled her closer, his arms strong and secure around her, she realized maybe that wasn't such a terrible fate after all. Lila stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of Victor's penthouse, watching the city lights flicker below. Her reflection stared back at her, and she barely recognized the woman she'd become. The gentle maid who'd once fallen asleep on this very floor was gone, replaced by someone harder. Someone who understood the price of loving a man like Viktor Vasilyev. Behind her, Victor's presence filled the room like a shadow. She could feel his eyes on her, watching, always watching. You're thinking too much, he said, his voice carrying that edge of command that made her shiver. Lila wrapped her arms around herself. How can I not, after everything that's happened? Victor moved closer, his footsteps silent on the plush carpet. You're afraid of what I am. No, she whispered, turning to face him. I'm afraid of what I'm becoming. His dark eyes searched her face, and she saw the predator there, the man who'd torn apart his enemies without mercy. But she also saw something else, a desperation he couldn't quite hide. Tell me what you want, Lila. His voice was soft, dangerous. Tell me you want to leave. She felt the tears burning behind her eyes. I can't. Why not? He stepped closer, crowding her against the window. His hand came up to cup her face, thumb brushing across her cheek. Because you know no one else will ever understand you like I do? Because no one else can protect you the way I can? Lila's heart thundered in her chest. Because I love you, she admitted, the words tasting like surrender. God help me, I love everything about you, even the darkness. Victor's eyes darkened. Then stop fighting it. His grip tightened slightly. "You can walk away, Lila, but know this. No one will ever love you like I do. No one will ever protect you the way I will." She leaned into his touch, feeling the calluses on his hands, hands that had both killed and caressed. This was her choice: to leave and save herself, or stay and belong to him completely. "I'm not walking away," she whispered, and she saw the triumph flash in his eyes. "But Victor, promise me something. Anything. Don't let me lose myself completely." He pulled her against his chest, his heart beating steady and strong. "You're mine, Lila. Every part of you. I'll protect all of it, even from myself." In that moment, Lila knew there was no going back. Victor was her world now, her safety and her danger all wrapped into one. And despite every rational thought screaming at her to run, she knew she would stay, because in his darkness, she'd found her own kind of light. The glass shattered against the wall, sending crystal shards raining across the marble floor of Victor's penthouse. Lila flinched, but kept her ground as Victor paced like a caged animal, his shoulders rigid with barely contained fury. "Anton!" Victor spat the name like poison. "My own brother." Lila's heart raced as she watched him. This man she'd grown to love despite everything, coming undone before her eyes. The betrayal cut deeper this time. Anton had been more than just Victor's right-hand man. He'd been family. "He's been feeding information to the Italians for months," Victor continued, his voice dropping to a deadly whisper. "Everything. Our shipments, our deals, our weaknesses." His eyes found Lila's. "Where to find you?" A chill ran down her spine. She'd trusted Anton, had even confided in him during those early days when Victor's world had felt too overwhelming. "Victor, please," she started, but he cut her off with a sharp gesture. "Don't." His eyes were cold, empty of everything except rage. "He dies tonight." Lila moved toward him, her heart hammering. "There has to be another way. More violence won't solve." Victor's hand shot out, gripping her arm. Not hard enough to hurt, but firm enough to silence her. "This is who I am, Lila. This is my world." His thumb traced circles on her skin, a gentle motion that contrasted with the steel in his voice. "Blood pays for blood. That's the only language these people understand." "And what about us?" She met his gaze, refusing to look away. "When does it end?" "It doesn't end." He released her arm, his fingers trailing down to catch her hand. "This is what you chose when you chose me." Tears threatened, but Lila blinked them back. "You don't have to do this." Victor's laugh was hollow. "You don't understand, Lila," he said, his voice hard as stone. "I've built this empire with blood. No one betrays me. Not without paying the price." He pulled away from her, already reaching for his phone. Lila watched him, her heart breaking for the man who could show such tenderness one moment and such cruelty the next. This was the reality of loving Viktor Vasilyev, the beauty and the brutality, forever intertwined. His men were already gathering, their dark figures filling the penthouse like shadows. Victor paused at the door, looking back at her one last time. In his eyes, she saw both love and darkness, and she knew that tonight would change everything between them. The door closed behind him with a final click, leaving Lila alone with the broken glass and the weight of what was to come. Victor's men surrounded the rival family's compound, their weapons drawn in the pale moonlight. Lila watched from the car, her heart pounding against her ribs as Victor stepped forward, his tall frame radiating deadly purpose. She'd seen him fight before, but something was different tonight. There was a coldness in his eyes that chilled her to the bone. The first gunshot split the air. Victor moved like a demon unleashed, precise and lethal. His enemies fell before him, their screams echoing in the night. Lila couldn't look away, even as her stomach turned. This was the man she'd fallen in love with, beautiful and terrible, like watching a storm destroy everything in its path. "Please," she whispered, though she knew he couldn't hear her. "Don't lose yourself completely." The battle was swift and brutal. Victor's enemies never stood a chance against his calculated fury. When the last man fell, he stood in the center of the chaos, his expensive suit splattered with blood, his chest heaving. Then he turned to look at her. Something in his eyes shifted when they met hers. The coldness melted, replaced by an emotion she'd never seen before: vulnerability. "Lila," he said, his voice rough as he approached the car. "You shouldn't have watched." She stepped out, her legs shaking. "I needed to see, all of it, who you really are." Victor reached for her, then stopped, seeming to realize his hands were stained with blood. But Lila closed the distance between them, taking his face in her hands. "I thought I could change you," she whispered. "I was wrong." Pain flashed across his features, but she continued, "I don't want to change you anymore. I love you, all of you. Even this." Victor's breath caught. For the first time since she'd known him, he looked uncertain. "You can't mean that, after everything you've seen." "I mean it," she said firmly. "You're mine, Victor Vasiliev, just as I'm yours." He pulled her against him then, his kiss desperate and deep. When he finally pulled back, his eyes were intense. "You're not just mine anymore, Lila. You're my equal, my everything." His voice dropped to a whisper, "My only weakness." Lila smiled through her tears, knowing that this was their truth. Their love would never be simple or pure. It would always be tainted by violence and darkness. But it was theirs. "Take me home," she said softly. Victor nodded, his arm tight around her waist as he led her to the car. Behind them, the compound burned, a testament to his power and violence. But his touch on her skin was gentle, loving. They'd both chosen this, chosen each other, knowing exactly what it meant. There would be no more running, no more resistance. They belonged to each other, in darkness and in light. And for the first time, that was enough. The morning sun filtered through the penthouse windows, casting long shadows across the marble floors. Lila stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, her reflection ghosting against the glass as she watched the city below. Behind her, Victor's presence filled the room like a dark cloud. "We could leave," he said, his voice low and rough. "Walk away from all of this." Lila turned to face him, studying the man who had both terrified and captivated her. The bruises from his last fight were still visible on his jaw, a reminder of the violence that followed him like a shadow. "Could we?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Would they really let you go?" Victor moved closer, his steps measured and deliberate. Even now, after everything they'd been through, he moved like a predator. "No," he admitted, "we can leave, but I can't promise the world will let us go so easily." His honesty struck her deep. This was Victor, ruthless and raw, yet willing to give up his empire for her. The thought made her chest tight. "I don't want to run," she said finally, meeting his dark gaze. "I don't want to spend my life looking over my shoulder, waiting for your past to catch up with us." Victor's jaw clenched. "Then what do you want, Lila?" She closed the distance between them, placing her hand on his chest. Under her palm, his heart beat steady and strong. "I want you," she said. "All of you. The darkness, the violence, the power. I choose it all." For a moment, Victor was perfectly still. Then his hand came up to cup her face, his touch surprisingly gentle for a man capable of such brutality. You understand what that means? This life, it will never be normal. Lila smiled. A small, sad thing. Normal was never an option the moment I fell asleep in your penthouse. A ghost of a smile touched Victor's lips. He pulled her closer, his arm wrapping around her waist possessively. You're mine, Lila, he whispered against her hair. Forever. She leaned into him, accepting the weight of her choice. They would never have a simple life, but they would have each other. In Victor's dangerous world, that would have to be enough. Forever, she agreed, sealing their fate with a kiss that tasted of promises and blood. Soaked redemption. Victor stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse, his reflection hard and unyielding against the city lights below. Blood still stained his shirt cuffs, a reminder of what he'd done to secure their future. Behind him, Lila watched, her heart racing at the sight of him. He was different now, changed by the war they'd survived together. But still, every bit as dangerous as the day she'd first met him. It's finished, he said, his voice carrying across the room. The last of them fell tonight. Lila approached him slowly, her bare feet silent against the marble floor. And the others? They won't dare challenge me again. Victor turned to face her, his dark eyes softening as they met hers. Not after what I did to protect what's mine. The word mine still sent shivers down her spine, but they weren't entirely from fear anymore. She'd accepted long ago that she belonged to him, just as surely as he belonged to her. Come here, he commanded softly, extending his hand. Lila went to him without hesitation, letting him pull her against his chest. His heartbeat was steady and strong beneath her palm, the heart of a killer, the heart of the man she loved. You changed everything, Victor murmured into her hair. Before you, there was only the darkness. Now, she prompted, looking up at him. Now there's you. His grip tightened possessively. My light in all this darkness. Victor led her to the balcony, the night air cool against their skin. Below them, the city sprawled out like a glittering carpet. His empire, built on blood and violence, but now transformed by something else. Something that looked almost like hope. We made it through the storm, Victor said, his voice low and intimate. Now we build what comes next. Together. Lila smiled softly, leaning into him. She knew their life would never be normal. There would always be danger, always be darkness. But they had found something rare and precious in the chaos. A love strong enough to survive it all. Together, she agreed, and felt Victor's lips brush her temple in response. They stood there in comfortable silence, the king and queen of their dark empire, watching as the city lights twinkled like stars beneath them. They had survived the impossible, and in doing so had created something new, something that balanced love with power, tenderness with strength. Victor's empire would continue to thrive, but now it had something it never had before, a heart. And in the end, that made all the difference. The city lights twinkled below the penthouse balcony like scattered diamonds on black velvet. Lila stood at the railing, her fingers gripping the cold metal as she watched the world that now belonged to them. Behind her, Victor's presence filled the space, dangerous and protective all at once. The night air carried the weight of everything they'd survived. The betrayals, the violence, the moments when death had seemed certain. But they'd made it through, together. Victor's footsteps were silent as he approached her, but Lila felt him drawing near. Her body had learned to sense him, to anticipate his touch before it came. His arms slipped around her waist, pulling her back against his chest. "What are you thinking about?" His voice was low, intimate, a tone reserved only for her. Lila leaned into him, allowing herself to feel safe in the embrace of the most dangerous man she'd ever known. Everything that brought us here, all the times I thought I'd lose you or myself. Victor's grip tightened. His breath brushed her ear as he spoke. You were never going to lose me, Lila. From the moment I found you sleeping on my couch, you were mine. She turned in his arms, meeting those dark eyes that had once terrified her. Now she saw what lay beneath the surface, the love that matched the violence, the tenderness that balanced the cruelty. The world's still dangerous, she whispered. Victor's laugh was soft but deadly. Let them try to take what's mine. I've built an empire of blood and violence, but you, his hand came up to cup her face. You're the only thing that matters. Lila reached up, tracing the scar on his jaw, a reminder of the battles they'd survived. Promise me something? Anything. Promise me that no matter how dark things get, you'll remember this moment. Remember that I chose you. Victor's eyes darkened with possession and pride. He leaned down, his lips hovering just above hers. You're mine, Lila, and I'll make sure no one ever takes you from me. Her heart raced at the familiar mix of fear and desire his words sparked. And you're mine, Victor, forever. His kiss was both gentle and fierce, like everything about him. As they stood there, wrapped in each other's arms, the city spread out before them like a kingdom they'd conquered together. The darkness would always be part of their world, but they'd found their light within it. They had survived the impossible. They had fought their way through betrayal and blood. And in the end, they had found something neither of them thought possible. A love strong enough to survive in the shadows. Victor pulled back, his forehead resting against hers. In the silence of their victory, no more words were needed. They had written their story in blood and tears, and now they would write their future together one day at a time, in their own dangerous paradise. The end?